Why I think this topic is so interesting and it matters. You see, video games give us a first-hand experience. This is my little introduction to the topic so that people that don't play video games can understand why this is so interesting. Because there's no other way often in life that we can simulate and experience stuff. Video games put us in this simulated reality. Movies don't do that. What movies do is we're still the third person. We're still outside watching in. We can get immersed more or less, and as technology and smell-o-vision develops, that will change as well. But the point is, video games already have that because you're in there, you're participating, you're part of the story. So that's why it's important that people understand why it'd be interesting to see a certain monster in a video game. First-hand experience, you get to explore that more detailed behavior of the monster because it's in an environment, it's in an already simulated world that is living, breathing, depending on the game. I'm going to get more into that in a moment. And you get to explore more of its, as I mentioned, reactions. And there's also different phases you can see the monster going through, like the Elder Scroll games, where you can see AI, simple characters doing their things from day to night. Maybe the bigger, better question is not what kind of monsters, but how we experience them in the game. Because there are already so many cool monsters in video games, but they're just experienced like everything else in these games. For example, a Menenangal, the vampiric type from Southeast Asia that separates body from torso or torso from lower body, and it flies around, this vampiric creature. That'd be awesome to experience in a video game, and it's maybe even out there. But what's the problem with most video games? You get excited there's this monster in there, but then you see it, and then it's just all hack and slash from then on, or magic and fighting, and that's it. You don't see other perspectives of the monster, and that's what I'm not into in video games that much, and I haven't been playing, and this is part of why. It's because you're not immersed. Once you start battling this thing, even the Elden Ring, these great games, you just get into this hack and slash mode, and you stop seeing the beauty of the world and all the design that went into this creature. A lot of people don't notice that. They notice the graphics real quick, but they don't notice the little things hanging off that the artist put in and all this stuff, unless they get it really into the game or content creating and they look at, concept art. So rather than walk through and just kill stuff, changing the narrative of the game, the purpose or the style of play, it feels like this hack and slash, it's like a safe formula for video games to go through. And some will venture out and change the game. Some will make it more about surviving. And then there's other things that go on. But it's a very safe formula to go and fight. That's what I think limits our appreciation of these monsters or general appreciation. In changing that narrative, some games do that. So instead of, going through the world and just fighting, there's a different way to do it. Or you're living as this thing and you're just exploring. And so it's interesting because with board games, the factors of different style of play are more explored. And in those different styles of play is where we can really experience cool monsters that we would want to see in games. MMOs have this living, breathing sandbox world like you would have in single-player games, but they are more so breathing and living because not just you experience them in real time, but other people with you. If somebody doesn't know what MMO is, it's a massively multiplayer online game. And now I say I enjoy experiencing monsters in these games because it's a real-time big world where these monsters walk around and they gotta do stuff. Because if you're not going to see them, somebody else is. Not like another game where you're out of view. That whole programming side doesn't have to work, or it's programmed differently to save on resources. No, here the monster has to do things. It has to go through a cycle that programmers write out for it, and that's the fascinating part. And when you're watching it and not just fighting it, because you don't see much when you fight. When you're watching it, you get to see all those details about it. And that's all that work that artists put into creating that being in this digital realm. That I find awesome. And I've experienced a lot of monsters like that, a lot more and closer and with crappy graphics of old, but I experienced them a lot more because of the situation I was in, rather than it pops up, I gotta kill it, I get a cool item done. I don't think about that monster anymore or experience. It doesn't create that strong feeling that later becomes nostalgia. And that's why a lot of us have that strong nostalgia from
I
these old.
can definitely relate to exactly what you described. Exactly the experiences you mentioned are what I've been able to experience. And specifically, like it doesn't even have to be a very unique monster, just a spectacular titanic threat that you can see and observe from a distance. And of course, if you get close to it, you get dinked. But if you maybe can gather sufficient allies to take it down, those massive PvP battles where we had like three raids plus, like two holding down the boss itself, fighting it, while we had one dedicated raid to fend off the enemy faction from stealing the boss from Salt. That was just
Yep.
partaking in an actually
Yes.
living, bring like in the now living game sense was phenomenal.
And doing it with people in a group. This is what I kind of like about playing with other people you don't know, because playing with your friends that you know in real life is actually different than with strangers. And when you play with strangers, it does make that realm more real too. When I do play with people I know, it feels again more like a game because you're distracted being with those people. But when you meet people there and you have to figure out your strengths as a group, this is the healer, this is the tank, and then you get on this monster, it makes that monster and the whole reality again more real because you're working with strangers on this strange thing, and that all creates a commonality, and that makes it more real. Let's take a look here what Matthew said. He said, why not a game focused around the perspective of a scientist geneticist that purposefully releases a creature he or she created upon the world to see how destructive it exactly something isn't that so
Mm-hmm.
great? So you create a monster, and that's how you win the game. You create something strong enough to destroy the whole military and humanity. Or maybe it's a different thing way that you can win. Maybe it integrates with humanity and becomes gets into politics and
Mm-hmm.
stuff and rules a different way. Oh, that'd be so cool.
Precisely. I've always had this one question come up to my mind. Okay, you're some random Joe Schmo, so it's perfectly understandable for you to be terrified of the atmosphere itself, the chord setting, the ambience, and whatnot. But how does the monster that lurks in the dark feel about doing so? So this is a game I would very much so love to experience. You could describe it as the Alien Isolation game, but inverse, where you are the monster that goes bump in the dark.
Indeed.
That is
Indeed.
something that I would
I
love to
always thought about
experience.
that when I was young. That's why I got into monsters and started doing this as an adult, because growing up, I always was fascinated in that monstrous side of things, not just the evil side, but the other side. I know how this reality
Just
is, and I know how
the
humans are.
inhumanness of it,
But
the
yeah,
perspective of not
let's
being
go here.
purely what you are in real life.
Yeah, that was fascinating, and maybe feeling as an outcast or outcasted sometimes in society. Maybe that spawned those thoughts even more.
A documentary or movie is something that you can perceive and technically interact with, but a game allows you to experience it, to experience things more hands-on. It leaves more of a lasting impression. Like with everything, as they say, when it goes through your hands, it's completely different than from just reading or watching it on a screen.
Hmm.
So it would need to be a game is perhaps the best tool for teaching in practical terms, since it, metaphorically speaking, and sometimes rather literally, if you're playing a tabletop game, things go through your hands, so you're able to more directly experience them.